He chases storms. I wonder if he's ever rode 3 seconds on a bull named Fu Manchu.
He lives in Nashville. You rode a mechanical, well, you were on a mechanical bull when it started. Josh Pate is with us at Josh Pate CFB. That's where you find him on YouTube as well. What is up, Pate? How are you?
Do you notice, because I'm the same way, when I'm talking about my dear friend Jim Dunaway, how often you start a sentence, but then you have to stop and you have to qualify the sentence. You rode you were on a mechanical bull in Nashville. It's crazy how that happened.
All facts. Facts.
It was very bachelorette. Yeah, I looked like I was wearing pink boots when I was up there. It didn't move very fast before I fell.
Hey, so Pate, one thing we've really never gotten into, we've talked movies with you, we've talked storms, we've never talked the NFL, and the only reason I want to bring this up is we were talking about Bryce Young and what the future is for Bryce Young. You saw him less than 2 years ago. The guy was elite. I will stick with it. I've seen a lot of quarterbacks come through Tuscaloosa. I think he's the best I've ever seen, most talented at that level. I still think there's a lot of meat on the bone. What do you think the future for Bryce Young is?
Still think he could be a star in the league. And granted, I'm not glued to the Sunday product, but I've watched for a long time. I've always run hypothetical scenarios in my head. Like everyone talks about Tom Brady and he's the greatest of all time, but he was in the right situation. I think about guys like Carson Palmer back in the day when he was great statistically all those years for Cincinnati in what was probably not a great organization. I always wondered, could Carson Palmer actually low-key be one of the best of all time had he been dropped in a little bit better situation? Guys, again, I'm not a hardcore NFL fan. I think there are 31 franchises in that league, and then there's Carolina. And Bryce Young got dropped where the former 32nd franchise used to be. And I really wonder what's going to happen there now. You know, it's not as easy as jumping in the transfer portal in the NFL, but I'm with you. I don't think the guy forgot all the critical factors that made him one of the best that we saw come through the college game. And it wasn't like he lit up the Mountain West late at night or something like that. Like he did it in the SEC. He did it at Alabama.
Yeah, interesting where Bryce is. In the college game, Michigan's making a change with USC coming to town. And Alex Orji goes in there. Do I have his stats right? His whole career, he's 4 of 7 throwing the football.
Yeah, I didn't know it was 7. I thought it was a little bit less. I know he threw it 4 times last week.
Yeah.
He didn't throw it at all last year. Not one time.
Well, what's going on? I mean, USC's improved to me. Their defense has improved. What's about to happen to Michigan, in your opinion?
Here's what was so bad. To answer your question first so I don't get sidetracked, not much. That's what's going to happen for Michigan. Not a whole lot. It can't. There's no mystery here. There is no let's roll with the backup. He may have insane upside. They wanted this guy to win the job. They built the offense, however you want to judge that, for him to win the job. The problem is he never took the job. So Davis Warren is playing with a supporting cast that outside of a tight end has no elite traits in terms of pass catching, yards after catch, etc. They're not great at anything they do offensively. So that's that. 2 weeks ago, I'm up there for the Texas game, and I am watching Quinn Ewers warm up, but also I'm watching Arch warm up, and I'm watching Texas's 3 warm up. And it is so glaringly obvious there are 3 quarterbacks on Texas's roster infinitely above and beyond anything that Michigan's about to trot out there. And it was a reminder, number one, how good Texas has been at recruiting and developing, and number two, how even at the highest levels, with everything pumped into these programs, if you don't have a quarterback, you don't have a shot.
Klatt was on with us yesterday, and as he said, I've done 1,000 Michigan games, and he was talking about how Wink Martindale is blitzing too much for their personnel. But he pointed out that, Michigan under Harbaugh was in 1 billion one-score games. I mean, it was like every week it was a one-score game. But Harbaugh knew how to manage those one-score games. And by the way, he had a quarterback that could do it. Like, he was managing one-score games with a guy that probably would be starting in the NFL today had he not gotten injured in the preseason. And they don't have that guy anymore. I mean, when I thought Michigan might fall off a little this year, Pate, I may not have thought they were going to fall off enough.
Yeah, well, so that's a good point about the low margin for error. But Jim Harbaugh always ran it like an NFL team. He always ran it like it was a Sunday game. And so that's where he is now. I think a lot of attention was paid on just the players they lost. But we have these examples that almost have your mind working against your logic in that, well, we've seen Georgia lose a bunch of players in the past. We've seen Alabama lose a bunch of players in the past. They're not them. They're not them. Michigan, there's a big difference between being an elite program and being a pretty good to really good program in terms of talent acquisition. Michigan's pretty good to really good. And so if you have that classification and you don't have quarterback figured out, and you were always a low margin for error, living on the margin sort of program to begin with, and you lose one of the best head coaches you've ever had and the best head coach in the game going, and then you also lost that quarterback. I don't know, maybe it was the helmet that people thought was just going to be thrown out there and that's worth something. But I said the other day to one of my buddies, I said, if I were to just take this product you've seen from Michigan so far this year and put Iowa uniforms on it, it would track very favorably. You would think that makes sense. That looks like Iowa football. They shouldn't beat Texas. They shouldn't be close. They can't score. They can't move the ball. It's really ugly. It's like watching a bowling ball try and stab someone in an attempt to win a game. But it's Michigan. It's not Iowa. It's just people let whatever defending national champion is supposed to mean, even though there's no belt over your shoulder someone's trying to take from you, they let what that means cloud their vision of what actually is this year. And what is a very average football team.
I do think Michigan's defense still can be elite and win them maybe 8 games. With that said, the team that took the biggest steps backwards, obviously Florida State. And I've never seen this, Pate. They have been favored by a touchdown or more in their first 3 games, and they've lost all straight up. I mean, that's nearly impossible to do. And now you've got Cal coming in, which is the most physical team they've seen all year. Cal is becoming one of those teams I like to watch. I like Mendoza. I was telling these guys, watching him last year in Berkeley, I think he's a really good quarterback. He's one of those quarterbacks I'm shocked people didn't throw money at. Jay Knott really hasn't been healthy yet. Once he comes back as a whole, and it might be this weekend in Tallahassee, they've got their hands full. They might drop to 0-4.
They came out of a bye last week. I mean, remember that. When you watched them against Memphis, that was them gearing up. That was taking the Coke bottle and shaking it up, and they twisted the cap, and you find out, oh, it's one of those commemorative Cokes that went flat in the 90s. I got no shot. Bear Bryant is on the side of this Coke. So it's got to be, I don't care how many millions of dollars you make. I know it provides a nice cushy landing at the end of the night, but it's got to be the most helpless, like soul-crushing feeling if you're Mike Norvell, because it's so obvious. If you talked to the NFL scouts that came through there in fall camp, Nick Saban went and watched him practice and said, hey, I think they're going to win the ACC. It is so obvious. They've got really good players. They don't have a good team. They've got individuals. They don't have a team. And he thought they did. Norvell thought they did. It was no accident. Everyone was saying the same thing about that team coming out of fall camp. They opened practice up to the media, by the way. So media sees everything down there. They were all convinced. And then they come out of the gate cold, and they've stayed cold, and they've gotten colder, and quarterback is very bad for them. And we'll give their defense a little credit. They did show a little bit of pride in performance last game, but it still didn't matter. But now they're 0-3, I guess. We can look to next season. The fan base can look to next season. They've still got to actually trot out there 9 more games. And it's so obvious it's a lost season. But I think, Lance, we're kind of in a weird place in the transfer portal era where you really can go from being 12-0 and an ACC champ to, if you're leaning on the portal, you just have the life sucked out of you the next year. Now, formerly, that would put you on the hot seat. But if you just got a new contract, and we're also in an era where it is feasible that could happen, knowing what teams are made of and knowing how much you're playing roulette trying to use the portal to manufacture that, I think you have to calibrate the way you judge a head coach. I don't mean you excuse it. But I mean, you look at it and you say, yeah, in 1994, this would not be acceptable. And although it's not acceptable in 2024, it's kind of understandable. Caveat, it better be fixed next year.
I do this little sheet with the TV schedule and start times every week for us to take notes on during the week. And during week 3, these guys were like, what a horrible schedule it is. And week 4 is not much better. You sent this out. I had written it down to talk about on the show today, but since you sent it out earlier on your social media, when I am college football commissioner, I'm firing everyone associated with schedule making on day 1. I had written down as a topic today, should we get Fox and ESPN in a room preseason and spread the games out?
Yes.
Is that what you're talking about, to sort of spread out the good games and not cluster them all in one spot?
Yes. Yes. Okay. So just a couple of quick approaches. I haven't been elected, but when I am elected, that's the first thing I will do. Is it's non-negotiable. Networks, you will get in a room together. We're not going to do it in the spring of 2024 to decide the fall of 2028. There is no reason for those schedules to be finalized anywhere before the spring of the year they're going to be played. The NFL does this every year. There is no reason college football can't do it. And it is mind-boggling to me that a sport that is worth so much cannot get out of its own way when it comes to scheduling and officiating. And we don't have time to talk about the latter, but the former, I'm looking at it and I'm saying, how do we know October 12th is coming down the road with like 24 big matchups, it seems like, and we've got to wade through this garbage. The non-conference schedules are terrible, but even beyond that, just the inability for the sport to have sane, like well-reasoned people in a room saying, if these games are going to be played anyway, might we want to spread them out a little bit? Might we want to put a little bit more gold in this bucket here and this bucket there? It's like, it's the second most popular sport in the country. I love it. I will fight for it until the death. But there are things about it, officiating and schedule making in particular, that just, it succeeds in spite of them instead of because of them.
I had a friend over to the house Saturday, Pate, and we were watching Bama and Wisconsin on the main. And they ran the first Big Noon Kick promo, and he said, did they just say Marshall is the Big Noon Kick next week? And I was like, I think that's what they just said. I rewinded. Yeah. Sure enough. And I'm like, well, USC Michigan is on CBS, and that I don't even have a problem with that. It's fine. They had first pick, obviously. How does the Big Ten not have a second a Saturday game that's worth the crap? I mean, we Marshall and Ohio State is who Klatt and Gus have to go pretend like they're interested in watching?
Hey, you know what? Also, I would say, so USC Michigan is the biggest Big Ten game this week, but CBS has it.
Right.
Even though I'm not going, CBS has it. But the Friday night game, Illinois, Nebraska,
yep.
that's the other Big Ten.
I know, second best game in the league that week, yes.
It does mean something. Like we'll see a lot of times Georgia and Alabama be favored by 4 touchdowns, but they're playing in primetime on ESPN because I know it means something for those companies to just have that brand there on their airwaves. But whoo, man, I give me the matchups. I don't really care about the brand. Give me the matchups.
Hey, you've got a big voice out there, Pate, so I'm gonna allow you to jump on this bandwagon with me. But really watching Kirk Cignetti and Curtis Rourke and what they did this past week to a bad UCLA team on the road, though, you start to look at this schedule, I think Indiana's going to win 10 games.
Have you just started calling him Coach Sig, like the fan base? You know, the fan base doesn't even use the letters CIG. They just use the cigarette emoji.
Oh, wow. That's pretty good.
Which is still around.
Yeah,
they got rid of the gun emoji, but the cigarette emoji is still there, and they just call him Coach Sig. And how about this? How about 13 seconds into national relevance, he called out the officiating this past week, and he called it a Mickey Mouse operation, paraphrasing, of course. So just good on Coach Sig. Go Indiana.
Yeah, I mean, have you really looked at it, though? I mean, that schedule, if that was, I mean, I don't know. Give me another team in the Big Ten that could possibly win the Big Ten. Like, Iowa's schedule is kind of a joke. Nebraska's schedule kind of a joke. But, I mean, that schedule is very beneficial.
I know down the road, a lot of people in the SEC office watch this show every morning, as they should. I don't know how many people in the Big Ten League office watch the show. But they have got to be pulling the remaining hair they have out of their head at the mere thought of Indiana football making a run to the Big Ten championship, not in basketball. We are specifically talking football here. Like, can you imagine those people? They think to themselves, we got rid of this problem. We got rid of divisions. Hold on. Being told Indiana's making a run. What? This wasn't supposed to work this way?
Well, I mean, that is a tough question. Who the second best team in the Big Ten is right now?
And they play each other. Like you got Oregon and Ohio State playing each other. You got Penn State and Ohio State playing each other. USC and Penn State play each other. And so if Indiana just lurks the entire season and lets everyone else knock each other off, and then you have 1 or 2 upsets somewhere, I mean, imagine that shark fin popping up offshore, and it surfaces on the beach, and it's Coach Sig, is that you in Indianapolis in December?
As a 31-point underdog to Ohio State, great TV ratings. We've been here before, is what they would say. I got to ask you, because Billy Napier is still saying he 100% sees a path to a fourth season. I think Billy Napier is a good coach. I don't know what's wrong with Florida. It just hasn't worked. Do you see a path for Billy Napier and or Scott Strickland, the athletic director, to be back another season?
I don't think so. I hate the hot seat stuff. Like, I like Billy Napier a lot. They've been great to us. I always have to preface it with that, because I don't take joy in talking about folks losing their jobs. And I know what the follow-up is. There are a lot of folks watching the show. I'd love to get fired for that many millions of dollars. Well, I know a lot of people talk about that as if money is a cure-all, but then again, there are plenty of miserable rich people out there. So it obviously, there's some kind of hole that can be there. There can be a void that's there that money doesn't fill. And I'm not even thinking about the head coach, by the way, when I'm talking about that. I'm thinking about your hundreds of support staff and their families that get affected. And I will tell you guys the same way I told you in the spring when I went down there. I think operationally, Florida is really good to elite. The head coach there notwithstanding, okay, if you want to fire Billy Napier, it's a big boy job and he gets it. But there are a lot of people, sports science, nutrition, strength and conditioning, recruiting operations, that are really good down there, to the point where my fascination right now is, if they make a change, is it AD and head coach or just head coach? I think it'd probably be the former instead of the latter. And then secondly, whoever gets hired down there, when they assess the overall landscape of Florida, I'm not quite sure that's the typical let's flush the entire thing and start over from scratch that taking over a new job would be, because I think a lot of what you would want to bring in is already there, even if at the very top what you need is not there.
All right, he is host of the Josh Pate College Football Show. You can find that on YouTube. You can follow him at Josh Pate CFB. The whole new Saturday tour is on the way to Norman, Oklahoma for the big game this week, the biggest game in the nation, Tennessee at Oklahoma. It gets talked about like Oklahoma and Josh Heupel are a relationship Taylor Swift would write a song about. Have we oversold that? Is that real? And how will it impact this game?
No. You've undersold
it. That's what I wanted to hear. I wanted bad blood.
Unlike those, this is actually a good song. And I could see after this game, if Heupel wins, if Tennessee wins, you remember, you guys were at the Bama-Tennessee game a couple years ago where they won in Neyland, right?
Dunaway was. He couldn't keep them off the field that night.
Yeah, I was up in Neyland.
Oh, you were there too. I forgot.
Yeah. I was charged with getting Nick Saban off the field safely.
And you did that, right?
Yeah.
It was shaky, though. It was shaky. It took Heupel an hour, 15 minutes to get to his post-game presser, and he reeked of cigar smoke. If this happens in Norman, it may not take that long because it's not a home game. I could just see like red substance staining his face. I could just see the blood dripping down over his chest. He may be shirtless in the postgame. It really is that intense. I don't know if we've ever said bloodlust on the show before. Lust, plenty of times.
Yes.
But not bloodlust. That is the best way I could describe how Josh Heupel feels about this show. Or this, not the show. You guys are fine. The game.
Oh, okay. If he feels that way about the show, it's fine, too.
That's right.
Just talk about us publicly. That's all we want. Josh Pate CFB on Twitter, host of the Josh Pate College Football Show on YouTube. Thank you very much, Pate. Enjoy Norman, and we'll talk again soon.
I'll see you guys.
All right, buddy. Josh Pate with us on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline.